My name is Major Elara Voss, United States Army Medical Corps. I am 32 years old. 5 years ago, my sister told my parents I had dropped out of medical school. She lied, and that single lie cost me my entire family. They cut me off. They blocked my number. They skipped my residency graduation. They were not at my wedding. For 5 years, I was no one's daughter. Then, last month, my sister was rushed into the emergency room, bleeding, unconscious, and dying on a gurney at Walter Reed National Military Medical Center in Bethesda, Maryland. The trauma team paged the chief surgeon on call. The bay doors opened, and when my mother saw the name on the white coat walking toward her daughter's stretcher, she grabbed my father's arm so hard it left bruises shaped like fingertips. Before we go any further, if this story is already hitting close to home, take 1 second and hit that like button. Subscribe to this channel and drop your location and local time in the comments. I want to know exactly where in the world you are watching from right now. Now let me take you back to the fall of 2019, to a kitchen table in Fayetteville, North Carolina, 3 miles outside the main gate of Fort Liberty, and the last time my father ever looked at me with anything resembling pride. Growing up, there were 2 daughters in the Voss household, but only one who mattered. My sister, Mara Voss, is 3 years older than me. She came out of the womb performing. School plays, student council, the girl who could walk into any room and have every adult laughing inside of 90 seconds. My parents, Gerald and Diane Voss, were a Fort Liberty family, roots and all. Dad had served 22 years as a sergeant first class in the United States Army before retiring with full honors. Mom did part-time bookkeeping for a defense contractor firm just outside the main gate. They valued 2 things above all else: appearances and obedience. Mara delivered both flawlessly every single day. I was the quiet one, the one with her nose buried in a biology textbook at Thanksgiving, while Mara held court at the dinner table. I was not rebellious. I was not difficult. I was simply invisible. There is a difference between being forgotten and never being seen in the first place. 8th grade, I placed second at the North Carolina State Science Fair, the only student from our school to qualify. That same weekend, Mara had a community theater performance in downtown Fayetteville. One guess where my parents went. When I came home with the ribbon, Dad glanced at it and said, "That's nice, Elara." He never asked what my project was about. He never did. I poured everything into my grades, my AP courses, my applications. I figured if I could not be the daughter they noticed, I would become the daughter they could not ignore. And for one brief, shining moment, I was. The day my acceptance letter arrived from Oregon Health and Science University, on a full Army HPSP scholarship, 3,000 miles from Fayetteville, something shifted inside that house for the first time in my life. Dad read the letter at the kitchen table. His eyebrows rose slowly. Oregon Health and Science, full Army scholarship. That is a real medical commission, Elara. Then he looked at me, really looked at me, and said 5 words I had been waiting 18 years to hear. Maybe you'll make something of yourself. Not a compliment, not exactly, but the closest thing to one he had ever offered me, and I held on to it like oxygen. Mom called Aunt Ruth that same night, then her sister, then 2 neighbors. "Elara got into medical school! Army scholarship! Can you believe it?" At dinner, I glanced across the table at Mara. She was smiling, but it was the kind of smile that stops exactly at the mouth. Her eyes were calculating, recalibrating. I know that now. At the time, I thought she was just tired from the drive down from Charlotte. That week, Mara started calling me 2-3 times a week. How's packing going? Who is your roommate? What is Portland like? She asked about my schedule, my professors, my classmates. She remembered every single name I mentioned. I thought my sister was finally seeing me. I thought getting into medical school had unlocked something real between us. I was feeding her ammunition, every detail, every vulnerability, and I handed it all over with a grateful smile. Third year of medical school. That is when everything cracked open. My roommate, my closest friend, was a woman named Sophie Reed. She had grown up moving through foster care with no family to speak of, and she was the single reason I survived first year. When I called home during a brutal anatomy exam week and Mom said, "Can't talk right now, Elara. Mara's having a rough day at work," it was Sophie who sat on the apartment floor with me and said, "Their loss. Now get up. We have cadavers to memorize." Sophie was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer in August of my third year. No family, no support system, just me. I walked into the dean's office the next morning. He approved a formal leave of absence, 1 semester, caregiver status, paperwork filed, spot held. I notified my Army HPSP advisor the same day, who documented the leave in my official military service record. I would return in January. Everything was legitimate. Everything was on paper. I moved into the spare bedroom at Sophie's apartment, drove her to every chemotherapy appointment, held her hands in the oncology ward at 3 in the morning when the pain climbed so high she could not breathe through it. I called Mara to tell her. I do not fully know why. Maybe I still believed she was the sister she had been pretending to be. I told her about Sophie, about the leave, about returning in the spring. Mara's voice was warm as syrup. "Oh my God, Elara, I'm so sorry. I won't say a word to Mom and Dad. I know they'd just worry." 3 days later, she called our parents. The call came at 11 at night. I was sitting in a plastic chair beside Sophie's hospital bed. My phone lit up. Dad. "Your sister told us everything. The dropping out, the boyfriend, all of it." "Dad, that is not—" "Mara showed us the messages. She showed us proof." I pressed my hand flat against the wall to stay steady. "Dad, I am sitting in a hospital right now. I am taking care of my friend who is dying. Mara said you'd say exactly that. She said you'd have a story ready." Mom came on the line, her voice shaking. "How could you lie to us for a whole year, Elara?" "Mom, I filed a formal leave of absence. I can show you the paperwork. I can give you the dean's number. My HPSP advisor has it all documented." "Enough." Dad again. "Don't call this house until you're ready to tell the truth." The line went dead. I sat on that hospital floor for 20 minutes. Sophie's IV beeped on the other side of the curtain. My phone still showed the call duration, 4 minutes and 12 seconds. That is how long it took my parents to erase me. 20 minutes later, a text from Mara arrived. "I'm sorry, Elara. I had to tell them. I couldn't keep your secret anymore." She was not sorry. She had executed the most precise strike of her adult life and signed it with a broken heart. I was 3,000 miles from Fayetteville. I had $46 in my checking account, and I had just become no one's daughter. Over the next 5 days, I called my parents 14 times. The first 3 went to voicemail. By the 4th, Dad's number was blocked. Mom blocked mine 2 days later. I sent 2 emails, both with my leave of absence paperwork and HPSP documentation attached. I included the dean's direct phone number. I included Sophie's oncologist's name and contact information. Neither email received a response. I mailed a handwritten letter, priority from Portland. 5 days later, it came back, returned to sender, unopened. I recognized my mother's handwriting on the envelope. I called Aunt Ruth, Dad's younger sister, the only person in our family who had ever treated me as equally as Mara. Ruth called Dad that same evening. She phoned me back 40 minutes later, voice heavy. "He told me to stay out of it, sweetheart. He said you made your bed." Ruth tried to tell him about the leave documentation. Dad hung up on her mid-sentence. 5 days, 14 calls, 2 emails, 1 letter, 1 intermediary. Every single attempt rejected, blocked, or returned. On the 6th day, I stopped calling. Not because I gave up, because I understood they had made their choice long before Mara called them. She simply gave them permission to stop pretending. Sophie died on a Sunday morning in December, quiet, the flat tone of the monitor and pale winter light through the hospice window. I was the only one in the room. I organized a small service. 6 people came. I stood at the front of a chapel that could hold 60 and delivered a eulogy to rows of nearly empty pews. That night, alone in Sophie's apartment, I found it tucked inside her copy of Grey's Anatomy, our running joke since day 1, a yellow sticky note bookmarking the chapter on the pancreas. Her handwriting, shaky but deliberate. "Finish what you started, Elara. Become the doctor I know you are. Don't let anyone, especially your own blood, tell you who you are." She had written it weeks before she died. She knew she would not be there when I needed the push most. I closed the laptop. Then I opened it again and filled out the re-enrollment form. 2 options, crumble or climb. I chose to climb. Not for my parents, not for revenge, for Sophie, and for the version of myself she believed in when no one else would. I went back in January. No family support, no safety net. I took on extra student loans, worked a part-time research assistant position, ate hospital cafeteria leftovers more times than I will ever admit. Medical school does not pause for your personal life. Anatomy exams do not reschedule because your family disowned you. 12-hour clinical rotations do not shorten because you cried in the supply closet at 2 in the morning. So I stopped crying and started working. I graduated on schedule. I matched into a surgical residency at Walter Reed National Military Medical Center in Bethesda, one of the most demanding Level 1 trauma centers in the entire United States military health system. Upon completing residency, I was commissioned, then promoted to major in the Army Medical Corps. That is where I met Colonel Margaret Drake, 58 years old, Chief of Surgery Emeritus at WRNMMC, built like structural steel wrapped in a white coat. She became the mentor I desperately needed and the mother figure I had lost. 3rd year of residency, I met Nathan Cole, a captain in the Army JAG Corps, doing pro bono legal work at a community assistance office near the hospital. Calm eyes, dry humor. The first person I told the full story to, who did not flinch, did not pity me, and did not try to fix it. He just listened. Then he said 4 words. "You deserve better than that." That was enough. We married on a Saturday afternoon in Colonel Drake's backyard in Bethesda. 30 guests. Nathan's father walked me down the aisle. I had mailed an invitation to Fayetteville. It came back unopened. Aunt Ruth was there, though. She cried enough for 2 parents. 5 years passed. I was appointed acting chief of trauma surgery at WRN-MMC, a role typically held by someone a decade older, made available when multiple senior surgeons deployed to combat theaters overseas. I had become someone my parents would not recognize. I need to pause here for just a second. If you have ever been in a situation where your family refused to hear your side, where the truth simply did not matter because someone else's lie was louder, drop a comment below right now. And if you think my parents are about to regret the last 5 years, type the word karma. Keep watching, because what happens next, even I did not see coming. January, present day, 3:07 in the morning. The pager pulled me out of a dead sleep. Nathan shifted beside me. Sergeant, our golden retriever, lifted his head from the foot of the bed. The screen glowed in the dark. Level 1 trauma activation. Motor vehicle collision. Single female, 35 years old, blunt abdominal trauma. Hemodynamically unstable. ETA, 8 minutes. I was dressed in 4 minutes. In the car, in 6. The roads outside Chevy Chase were empty and wet, that specific shade of January black the eastern seaboard does better than anywhere else. I ran through the case on the drive-in. Mechanism of injury, organ involvement, surgical options, blunt abdominal trauma, unstable vitals, likely splenic rupture, possible liver laceration. I had performed this surgery over 100 times. I badged through the ambulance bay entrance at WRN-MMC and walked straight to Trauma Bay 2. My team was already assembling. 2 surgical residents, a trauma nurse, anesthesia standing by. I picked up the intake tablet from the charge desk and swiped to the incoming patient chart. Patient, Elara Voss. Date of birth, March 14, 1990. Emergency contact, Gerald Voss, father. I stopped walking. The hallway noise, monitors, intercom, shoes on linoleum, pulled back like a tide going out. For 2 seconds, maybe 3, I was not a surgeon. I was a 26-year-old sitting on a hospital floor in Portland, phone still warm in my hand, listening to a dial tone. Major Voss, Staff Sergeant Linda Torres appeared at my shoulder. You okay? I looked up, blinked, set the tablet down. I'm fine. Prep Bay 2 and page Major Patel. I want him on standby. The ambulance siren wailed in the distance, getting closer, and behind it, I already knew, were 2 people I had not faced in 5 years. The ambulance doors opened and the stretcher came fast. Mara was strapped down, unconscious, an oxygen mask fogging with shallow breaths, blood across her shirt, one arm hanging limp off the side rail. The paramedics called out numbers, blood pressure dropping, heart rate climbing, 2 large-bore IVs running wide open. Behind them, running, came my parents. My mother had aged an entire decade, hair thinner, face drawn, bathrobe on, slippers on the wrong feet. My father was in a flannel shirt thrown on in a panic, his face the color of old paper. "That's my daughter!" he called past the triage desk. "I need to speak with whoever is in charge." Staff Sergeant Torres put both hands up. "Sir, the trauma team is already on this. The chief is handling it personally. The waiting area is this way." Torres glanced through the glass partition toward me, gowned, gloved, badge visible at chest level. She read the name. Her eyes went wide for just a fraction of a second. I gave one small shake of my head. Not now. Torres composed herself in under 2 seconds and led my parents down the hall. Mom was whispering prayers, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. Dad kept turning back, looking through every window he passed. "She is all we have," he said to no one in particular. "Please, she is all we have." I heard every word through the partition glass. She is all we have, as though I had never existed. I stepped into the scrub room alone. 30 seconds, that is all I allowed. I turned on the faucet, let the water run hot over my hands, looked at my reflection in the stainless steel above the sink, distorted, warped, the way everything felt in that moment. Scrub cap on, badge visible. The face of a woman who had been surgically removed from her own family tree, now being asked to surgically save the woman who had held the blade. Part of me wanted to walk out, call Patel, let someone else carry this. But there was a woman on that table with a ruptured spleen and a grade 3 liver laceration, losing blood faster than the team could replace it. She was going to die within 30 to 40 minutes if the best surgeon in this building did not operate. And the best surgeon in this building was me. I paged Major James Patel directly. "I have a conflict of interest. The patient is a family member. Formally disclosing it now, documenting it in the chart. If my judgment appears compromised at any point, you take the lead immediately. No questions." Patel's voice was completely steady. "Understood, Chief." I told Torres to note the disclosure in the nursing record. Everything by the book. Everything on paper. Then I pulled on fresh gloves, pushed through the OR doors, and looked down at the table. My sister's face, bruised, the oxygen mask fogging and clearing. She looked smaller than I remembered. For exactly 3 seconds, she was not the woman who had dismantled my life. She was a body on my operating table. And that was precisely how I needed her to be. "Let's go. Scalpel." 3 hours and 40 minutes. That is how long it took to rebuild what a steering column and a red light had torn apart. Ruptured spleen, removed. Grade 3 liver laceration, repaired with precision sutures, layer by painstaking layer. Internal bleeding from 2 separate mesenteric vessels, clamped, cauterized, controlled. I did not speak unless I needed to. Suction, clamp, lap pad, retract. My hands moved the way they have always been trained to move. Steady, deliberate. Fast when speed was the priority, and slow when precision mattered more. The residents watched the way they always watch my cases, and I felt their attention sharpen when the liver repair reached its most technically demanding point. I did not falter. At 6:48 in the morning, I placed the final closing stitch. Mara's vitals were stable, blood pressure normalized. She was alive. Major Patel pulled his mask down. "Elara, that was flawless. Do you want me to speak with the family?" I peeled off my gloves, dropped them in the bin, washed my hands. Automatic, the same sequence 10,000 times before. "No," I said. "This one is mine." I straightened my scrub top, checked my badge, took one breath. Then I walked toward the waiting room. The hallway had never felt so long. The waiting room had that fluorescent quiet military hospitals develop in the early morning hours. 2 other families were scattered in far corners. A wall television murmured a weather forecast to no one. And in the center row, rigid, sleepless, terrified, were my parents. I pushed through the double doors, still in surgical scrubs, mask pulled down, scrub cap off, hair pulled back tight. My badge hung at chest level, printed in clean block letters readable from 6 feet. Major Elara Voss, MD, FACS, Chief of Trauma Surgery, WRNMMC. Dad stood first, reflex from 22 years of military bearing. Doctor, how is she? Is Mara... He stopped. His eyes dropped to my badge, rose to my face, dropped to the badge again. I watched the recognition move through him like a current, a tremor starting in his hands, climbing to his jaw. Mom looked up half a second later. Her lips parted. No sound came out. Her right hand clamped onto Dad's forearm with a force that would later leave 4 bruises. 5 seconds of silence. 5 seconds that held 5 years. I spoke first, calm, clinical, the same measured tone I use with every family in this room. Mr. and Mrs. Voss, I am Major Voss, Chief of Trauma Surgery. Your daughter Mara sustained a ruptured spleen and a grade 3 liver laceration. Surgery was successful. She is stable in the ICU. You may see her in approximately 1 hour. Mr. and Mrs. Voss, not Mom, not Dad. I watched that land. I watched it cut. My mother took a step toward me, arms beginning to lift, a sob already breaking. Elara! Oh my God! I stepped back, half a step, polite, unmistakable. She froze. Her hands hung suspended between us, then slowly dropped to her sides. Dad's voice came out rough, like gravel on pavement. You're a doctor. I am. You're the chief. I have been for 2 years. But Mara told us. What exactly did she tell you? He closed his mouth, opened it, closed it again. The machinery of 5 years of certainty crumbling in real time. Mom was crying now, not quietly. We thought you dropped out. She told us you were... She told you I dropped out. That I had a boyfriend with a substance problem. That I was homeless. That I refused to contact you. No shaking in my voice. No tears. I had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times. In the shower, in the car, in the dark before sleep. I had never imagined it would happen in surgical scrubs under fluorescent hospital lights. None of it was true. Not a single word. Through the glass behind me, Torres pressed one hand slowly to her mouth. Captain Yuki Kimura, second-year surgical resident, looked deliberately away, jaw tight. Dad reached for the old instinct. This is not the time or place, Elara. Your sister is in the ICU. I know exactly where she is. I just spent 3 hours and 40 minutes making sure she survives to see tomorrow. He had nothing. For the first time in my life, my father, a man who had never once been at a loss for a directive, had absolutely nothing. Mom reached for the back of a chair to steady herself. "The letters," she whispered. "You said you sent letters." 2 emails, both with my leave documentation attached. The dean's direct number included. Sophie's oncologist name and hospital line included. You sent the handwritten letter back, unopened. I recognized your handwriting on the return envelope. She pressed her fist against her mouth. Dad stared at the floor. I called 14 times in 5 days. I asked Aunt Ruth to speak with you. You told her to stay out of it and hung up on her mid-sentence. I was not accusing. I was reciting. Facts do not need volume to carry weight. Then Torres appeared at the door with routine hospital business. "Major Voss, I apologize for the interruption. The board chair reviewed the overnight trauma log. The Physician of the Year selection committee asked me to pass along their congratulations on tonight's outcome." She said it the way she would say anything routine on a Tuesday morning. She had no idea she had just detonated a second device in the room. Mom looked at me, eyes swollen, bathrobe still on. "Physician of the Year." "It is an internal recognition. It is nothing." I turned to Torres. "Thank you. I need to check post-op vitals." I walked toward the ICU corridor, measured steps, spine straight. I did not look back. But I heard my mother's voice behind me, small and completely ruined. "Jerry, what have we done?" And for the first time in my life, I heard my father say absolutely nothing. Because silence, for the first time, was the only honest thing he had left. I have to stop here for just a second. What do you think Mara told my parents when they walked into that ICU room? Option A, she finally tells the complete truth. Option B, she doubles down on every lie. Option C, she plays the victim one more time. Drop your answer in the comments right now. And if you have not subscribed yet, this is the moment. Because what happens in that room is where the whole architecture comes down. I will be right here, 4 hours later. ICU, room 6. Morning light cutting through the blinds in long, pale strips. I walked in for the standard post-operative assessment. Vitals, drainage output, wound check. Routine. Except nothing about this was routine. Mara's eyes were open. Glassy from the anesthesia, but open. She blinked at the ceiling, blinked at the IV pole. Then her eyes tracked sideways and found me. She squinted, read my badge, read it again. The color left her face the way I have only ever seen it leave patients who have just received a prognosis they were not prepared for. "Elara." Her voice was sandpaper. "Good morning, Mara. I am your attending surgeon. You sustained a ruptured spleen and a grade 3 liver laceration. Surgery went well. You are going to make a full recovery." "You're a doctor." Not a question, a reckoning. "I am the chief of this department. I have been for 2 years." I watched the sequence move through her: confusion, disbelief, fear. And then, even now, lying in a hospital bed with my sutures holding her liver in place, the quick flicker behind the eyes. Calculation. Even now, she was trying to figure out how to reframe this. Elara, listen, I can explain. You do not need to explain anything to me. I nodded toward the glass door where my parents stood in the hallway, faces wrecked. You need to explain it to them. I updated her chart, checked the surgical drain, and left without another word. I did not stay to hear what happened next. But the ICU floor heard it. Mara's room was not soundproof, and neither, it turned out, was the truth. Aunt Ruth walked in at 9:45 that morning. I had called her from the scrub room after surgery, not to deploy her as a weapon, but because Mara was her niece too, and Ruth deserved to know. But Ruth came prepared in a way that 5 years of quiet watching will do to a woman with a filing system and a very long memory. She did not sit down. She stood in the center of the room and said, I have been waiting 5 years to have this conversation, and I am not waiting one more minute. She pulled out her phone and opened a folder labeled, I found out later, Elara Proof. Inside, screenshots of every email I had sent my parents in those first desperate days. My formal leave of absence from OHSU, signed by the dean, stamped with the registrar's seal. My Army HPSP leave documentation. My re-enrollment confirmation. A photograph of my residency graduation, me in cap and gown, diploma in hand, Aunt Ruth standing beside me, the only family member in the frame. She held the phone out. Mom took it with trembling hands. And here, Ruth said, swiping to a text thread, this is from Mara, sent to me 4 years ago. She read it aloud without pausing. Don't tell Mom and Dad about Elara's residency. It'll just confuse things. They're finally at peace. The room went completely still. Mara stared at the ceiling. The calculation was gone from her eyes. What had replaced it was something I had never once seen there in 35 years. The look of someone who has finally run out of rooms to hide in. You told me to stay quiet for the family's sake, Ruth said, looking directly at Mara. But this family has not had peace. It has had a 5-year blackout. She turned to my parents. And the two of you let this happen. Not because you did not love Elara, but because loving Mara was easier. And you have always known that. Nobody argued. There was nothing left to argue with. Mom sank into the chair and scrolled through Ruth's phone, reading my emails one by one, lips moving silently. She stopped on the last one, the one I had sent the night before my residency graduation. I know exactly what it says. I have reread it 100 times in my own sent folder. Mom, I don't know if you'll ever read this. I graduated from residency today. I wish you were here. I'm still your daughter. I never stopped being your daughter. Mom doubled over in the chair. Not crying. It was beyond that. It was the sound of someone meeting the full, unfiltered weight of a mistake they can never undo. Dad stood at the window, back to the room, shoulders shaking. Aunt Ruth told me later it was the first time she had ever seen her older brother cry in 62 years. Not at their mother's funeral, not when his business nearly collapsed. Not ever. He cried now, silently, facing the hospital parking lot, while the monitor beeped and Mara lay in the bed she had made for herself. She had stopped talking. The IV dripped. Her eyes were fixed on a point on the ceiling that held no answers. The persona she had worn for 35 years was in pieces on the floor, and no amount of charm or reframing was ever going to reassemble it. You missed her wedding, Gerald. Ruth's voice was quiet now, spent. Nathan's father walked her down the aisle. Do you understand what that means? Dad did not turn from the window, but he spoke. 4 words, low, cracked clean down the center. What have we done? Not a question, not asking anyone, convicting himself. I returned that afternoon, end of my shift, 22 hours since the pager had woken me. My parents were still there. Of course they were. Mom stood the second I walked in. Elara, baby, I am so sorry. I raised one hand gently but firmly. I hear you, and I believe you mean that. But sorry is a word. It is a starting place, not a destination. No anger, no tears. Just the clarity that only remains after you have burned through every other emotion, and what is left is the truth, clean and simple. I am not the girl you sent away. I am not the girl who spent 5 days begging you to listen from 3,000 miles away. I am someone who built an entire life without you. And if you want to be part of it now, it will be on my terms, not Mara's, not yours, mine. Dad opened his mouth, old reflex, then closed it and nodded. A small, devastated nod. I looked at Mara. When you have recovered, you and I are going to have a real conversation. Not today. Today, you are my patient. I do not mix the two. I left, spine straight, steps measured. I did not turn around. I am not closing the door, but I am the one who decides when it opens, how wide, and who walks through. 2 weeks later, Mara was discharged. Her incision was healing. The rest of her, not so much. I chose the meeting location, a coffee shop in Rockville, Maryland, neutral ground, exactly halfway between her apartment and my house in Chevy Chase. Nathan came but sat at a separate table near the window. Mara walked in looking hollowed out. The confidence she usually wore like a uniform was entirely gone. For the first time in my memory, my older sister looked exactly her age. She sat down, wrapped both hands around a cup she never touched, and stared at the table. I am not going to yell at you, I said. I am not going to list every lie. You know what you did. What I want to know is why. Silence long enough that the barista called a name from the counter and it echoed off the walls. Then quietly, because you were going to be everything I wasn't, and I couldn't handle it. I let that sit. That is the first honest thing you have said to me in 10 years. I'm sorry, Elara. I know you are. But sorry does not return the years. Sorry does not put Dad at my wedding. Sorry does not unsend that box Mom mailed back. My high school graduation things, returned like I was already dead to her. She looked away. Her eyes were wet. Real tears. I know the difference now. Then she said something I had not prepared for. I also called your medical school twice. I tried to get them to revoke your leave of absence. I told them you had fabricated the caregiver documentation. The coffee shop hummed steadily around us. I looked at her for a long moment. Your dean wouldn't act on it. He protected you. He did not protect me, Mara. He believed the truth. That is not the same thing. I set my cup down. I am not cutting you out of my life, but I am setting conditions. You will tell the full truth to every family member you lied to, every aunt, uncle, and cousin who spent 5 years believing I was in rehab or living on the street. Every single story corrected, in writing. A group email to the full family, all 47 people. Ruth will confirm everyone receives it. She nodded. Small, defeated. No performance in it at all. I met with my parents the following week. Nathan drove me to Fayetteville. We sat at their kitchen table, the same one where Dad had read my acceptance letter years ago. I am open to rebuilding, I said. But I need both of you to commit to family counseling. Not for me, for yourselves. You need to understand how you came to believe a lie about your own daughter for 5 years without once picking up the phone to check. Dad's jaw tightened. We don't do that in this family. That is exactly why we are here, Dad. Mom placed her hand gently on his arm. He looked at her, then at me. Something behind his eyes cracked. Not open, not yet, but cracked. Fine. I stood to leave, then turned back. Nathan's father walked me down the aisle. That cannot be undone. But if you want to know your future grandchildren, you start now. Not with grand gestures, with consistency. Apologies expire. Boundaries do not. That is the difference between sentiment and structure. One more pause. And I mean it this time. If you have been in a situation like this, if you know what it feels like to build a life without the people who should have been there from the beginning, leave me a comment right now. Tell me, what would you have done? Would you have opened that door? Hit that like button, subscribe, and let us keep going together. We are almost there. 1 month later, the annual Military Medical Excellence Gala at the Bethesda Marriott. 200 people in the main ballroom. Surgeons, department heads, senior officers in dress uniform, hospital administrators, board members. Crystal glasses, name tags on lanyards. A string quartet playing something classical that no one was listening to. I wore a simple black dress. Nathan sat at a front table looking like he had been born in formal attire. Colonel Drake sat beside him, arms folded, wearing the faintest smile, the one she reserves for moments she has been quietly engineering for a long time. The MC stepped to the podium. This year's Physician of the Year, a surgeon whose clinical excellence, composure under extreme pressure, and total commitment to her patients have set a new standard for this institution. Major Elara Voss, Chief of Trauma Surgery, Walter Reed National Military Medical Center. Standing ovation from the surgical staff who had watched me work for 5 years. I walked to the stage, spotlight warm, podium solid under both hands. 5 years ago, I almost quit. Not because I could not do the work, but because I lost the people I believed I needed to keep going. What I learned is that the people you truly need are not always the ones you are born to. Sometimes they are the ones who choose you. I looked at Colonel Drake, at Nathan, at my team in the third row. Then I looked toward the back of the ballroom, last row, 2 seats Aunt Ruth had quietly arranged. My parents. Mom in a navy dress she had clearly purchased that week. Dad in a dress uniform tie he visibly hated. Both sitting with their hands folded in their laps, looking up at the stage with grief and pride fighting for the same face at the same time. And sometimes, I said, the ones you were born to find their way back. Late, but here. Mom covered her mouth with both hands. Dad stood up. The applause filled everything else. After the gala, Dad found Nathan near the coat check. He stood in front of my husband for a long moment. I owe you an apology. I should have been the one to walk her down that aisle. Nathan extended his hand. With all due respect, sir, you should have been a lot of things, but we're here now. They shook hands. Dad did not let go right away. Mara sent the email on a Wednesday evening. Ruth confirmed delivery to all 47 addresses. I did not read it until the next morning. Nathan brought me coffee and set the laptop on the kitchen table without a word. 3 paragraphs. No excuses. No soft language, just the facts laid bare. She had lied about my leaving medical school, fabricated evidence, maintained the deception for 5 years, and deliberately prevented our parents from learning the truth. She ended with, Elara never abandoned this family. I made sure they believed she did. That is entirely on me. The responses came in waves. Uncle Pete's wife called Ruth in tears. Cousin David in Vermont sent Mara a one-line reply. I don't know who you are anymore. Our grandmother, Nana, 89 years old, called me directly. I am 89 years old, she said, voice paper thin but fully furious. And I have never been lied to this thoroughly by my own blood. Forgive an old woman for not seeing it. There is nothing to forgive, Nana. You were lied to. We all were. Nobody organized a campaign against Mara. Nobody sent group messages declaring her finished. But the trust she had accumulated over 35 years, the currency she had been spending her entire adult life, was gone. You could feel it in the silence after her email, in the replies that never came, in the invitations that quietly stopped arriving. No one punished Mara. They simply stopped believing her. And for someone who had built her entire identity on being believed, that was punishment enough. My parents began counseling in February. A therapist in Bethesda named Dr. Carmen Reyes, calm, direct, the kind of professional who does not let you sidestep a question. Mom took to it immediately. She had been carrying the weight of her own passivity like a stone in her coat pocket for years, and the first time Dr. Reyes named it, enabling through deliberate silence, Mom broke down and did not stop for 40 minutes. Dad struggled. He attended, he sat in the chair, he answered questions in the fewest words possible. But Dr. Reyes told him, Ruth relayed this, that his lifelong need to be right, his absolute refusal to revisit a decision once made, had been the structural load-bearing wall of this entire disaster. Mara provided the lie. Dad's pride cemented it into place. He did not argue with her. That, Ruth said, might have been the first real sign of change. 3 weeks into counseling, Mom mailed me a letter, handwritten. The irony was not lost on either of us. "I failed you," she wrote. "Not just when I believed Mara, but every single time I chose peace over fairness. Every time I saw you standing in the doorway, quiet and patient, and told myself you were fine, because it was easier than admitting I was not brave enough to fight for you." I read it at the kitchen table. Sargent was asleep across my feet. I did not cry, but I held that letter for a long time. Then I opened the drawer where I keep the things that matter. Sophie's sticky note, my returned letters, the wedding invitation that came back unopened, and I placed it inside. Same drawer, different side. Progress is not always dramatic. Sometimes it is simply rearranging what you carry. I am sitting in my office at WRN-MMC now. It is late. The hallway outside is quiet. That particular stillness military hospitals have after visiting hours end and before the night shift builds its energy. My nameplate is on the door. My diplomas are on the wall. Not because I need to see them, but because the residents who pass this office every morning do. On my desk, a framed wedding photograph. Nathan, Colonel Drake, Aunt Ruth, 30 guests, a backyard in October light. No parents in the frame. But on the bookshelf beside it, a new photograph taken 3 weeks ago. Mom and Dad standing on my front porch in Chevy Chase, winter coats on, looking slightly lost and trying hard not to show it. Dad's hands are in his pockets. Mom is mid-smile, trying too hard but genuinely trying. It is awkward. It is imperfect. It is real. If you are watching this and you see yourself anywhere in this story, whether you are the one who was silenced or the one who did the silencing, I want to tell you something. The truth does not expire. It does not matter whether it takes 5 days or 5 years. The truth has a patient, unhurried way of arriving exactly when it is most needed. You cannot accelerate it, and you cannot outrun it. I did not get revenge on my sister. I did not need revenge. I became someone who did not need it. And that turned out to be the most complete response I could have given. Not a scheme, not a plan, just a life, built fully, deliberately, on my own terms. If you are waiting for your family to see you, really see you, stop waiting. See yourself first. Build the life you deserve with the people who actually show up. And when the others finally turn around, let them find a door that you control. You decide when it opens. You decide how wide. You decide who walks through. That is not revenge. That is architecture. Sunday morning, first week of February. Light snow falling outside the kitchen window in Chevy Chase. The kind that settles on the bare branches and makes everything look like it is being quietly forgiven. I am making French toast. Nathan is grinding coffee beans, singing off-key to something on the kitchen radio. Sargent is stationed under the table, fully committed to the possibility of falling crumbs. The doorbell rings. I wipe my hands on a kitchen towel and open the front door. Mom and Dad are standing on the porch in their winter coats. Dad is holding a bottle of orange juice like he is not entirely sure what to do with his hands. Mom is carrying a tin of homemade shortbread, her shortbread, the kind she made for every one of Mara's school events and never once for mine. "Hi," Mom says, nervous, hopeful. "Come in," I say. "Coffee's almost ready." Dad steps inside and looks around slowly, cataloging the house he has never stood in, the life he came within inches of never knowing existed. He clears his throat. "Can I help with anything?" I look at him. My father, Gerald Voss, 62 years old, Sergeant First Class, United States Army, retired, standing in my kitchen for the first time in his life, asking permission to be useful. "You can set the table, Dad." He nods, goes to the cabinet I point to, takes out the plates, counts them, looks at me. "4?" "4." He sets them down one by one, carefully, like they might break if he is not completely gentle. Nathan hands him a mug of coffee. Mom hugs me at the stove. Not a dramatic movie embrace, just a quiet one. Arms around me, forehead resting against my shoulder. No words, just holding on. Sergeant thumps his tail against the floor. Snow falls outside the window. The French toast sizzles in the pan. It is not perfect. It is not the childhood I deserved or the reconciliation that films promise. But it is real. And real is more than I had for a very long time. My name is Major Elara Voss, United States Army Medical Corps. I am 32 years old, and I am finally, slowly, carefully, letting myself be someone's daughter again. 4 plates. It is a start. If this